Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online, recorded live on Twitch, 1500 Universal Time. I am your host, Matterall, from Destructive Influence Corporation and NC Dot, and also from INN. Today we're going to talk about Tech 3 cruisers, and those were released in the Apocrypha expansion, and they were made from ingredients that came out of wormholes, and were really amazing combinations of ships to give you an amazing amount of choice. And they have needed to be revamped for a while now. So that's what we're going to talk about today with some of our game experts and panel. And let's go ahead and get into introductions and get started. Say hello, Apotheny. Let's go down alphabetical order.
Hey, what's up?
Do you mind introducing yourself, Apotheny?
Oh, sure. Sorry. Hey, I'm Apotheny. I'm a member of Sniggeredly in Pandemic Legion. I used to be an FC, but now I do more EVE tournament-based stuff.
Asher Elias, FC for Goonswarm.
Hello. I actually started playing EVE, I think, the day that Apocrypha was released. So I am the perfect expert, as I was born when the T3s were.
Nice.
Carneros.
Good morning. I'm Carneros, the CEO of the Bastion Imperium Coalition.
Elise Randolph.
Hello, I'm Elise Randolph, member of Pandemic Legion, and we're probably one of the first people to use the Tech 3 cruisers. So, and we've used them pretty proficiently for the last, 5 years or so.
Yeah. And Seamus.
Hello, I am Seamus Donoghue of EVE University. I am a member of the Education Department.
Great. And also joining us is, wow, we got a little reward there. I'll check out what that is in a minute. All right, we also have Celine, who's joining us, who's former CCP dev, but head of Mercenary Coalition, was before CCP and after CCP. So he knows a bit about these things since he worked on the Apocrypha expansion. So we'll bring him in just a second. All right, let's just open up the topic and let's talk about T3s. Somebody want to introduce what they are just a little bit to give people background that don't know?
Sure, I can do that.
Right.
All right, so Tech 3 strategic cruisers, just to give you the background. As you know, all ships have rig slots, high slots, mid slots, low slots. Tech 3 strategic cruisers have an additional set of slots in addition to this. These are called subsystem slots. Right now, every strategic cruiser has 5 subsystem slots: offense, defense, electronics, engineering, and propulsion. And to assemble a strategic cruiser from packaged form, you need not only the whole item, you also need at least one of each of the different subsystems. And if you have multiples of each subsystem type, the game will ask you, which subsystem do you want to put into this when you assemble it? And the different subsystems provide different sorts of bonuses, so you can choose what bonuses you want to attach to your strategic cruiser. That's basically Tech 3 strategic cruisers in a nutshell, I would imagine.
It has one more interesting factor that you don't see on other ships. The concept is it is so tightly integrated with the pilot that if you lose the ship in combat, it will actually lose a part of the pilot as well, a part of the pilot's mind, and that's represented in game by skill point loss.
Yeah.
Interesting feature for that.
You will actually lose $5 if the ship dies.
No.
Is that
Just
what it
pull
comes
your
out to?
leg.
Oh, okay.
No. Yeah. What happens is if your strat cruiser blows up, you lose 1 level in a randomly selected subsystem skill that's associated with that strategic cruiser. So if you're flying a Loki class Minotaur strategic cruiser and it blows up, then the game's going to randomly select one of the 5 relevant subsystem skills: Minotaur offensive, Minotaur defensive, and so on. It'll pick one of those 5 and you lose 1 level from that randomly selected skill.
All right, cool.
Which, if you want it back up to the same level, of course, you'll have to start skill training it back up again.
Yeah, I'd like to point out to all the follows. Thank you guys very much for supporting the program. And also, Celine has joined us. Can you just say hello real quick?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks for coming, making time. All right, so that was a quick introduction to T3s. Is this true that, I know you're probably out of NDAs, but maybe you don't want to talk about this, that you worked on Apocrypha, Celine?
Yeah, myself and CCP Whisper was the associate producer at the time, and trying to remember, Grayscale. Me and Grayscale were working on Apocrypha. There were several primary features in that expansion, but the 2 biggest ones were wormholes and the new resources in those, and strategic cruisers. Myself and Grayscale, we did all of the wormhole part of the feature, and another team did the strategic cruiser part of it. We did a lot of back and forth between the 2, but I was not on the primary team for T3s, but we had a lot of input into how they were going to be built, and all of that stuff.
Oh, that's cool. So somebody bring us up to speed. What's going on with T3s, and why is it even happening? I don't know. Anybody? Let's talk.
I can touch on it.
Good, great.
So T3s are and have been a very strong ship for quite a while, basically since PL started using them as a coherent doctrine, and they had a lot of power in that they have very small signature radius and they have really high resists, which means that there's almost no way to punch through them if there's any Lachi on the field, because they will almost always catch reps unless you can just totally alpha the ship. And using like a large artillery to alpha a T3 is pretty tough, because you got to get it going really slow and have a lot of target banners on it, and just also have a lot of ships to alpha through it. So it's a really tough hull, and so being a cruiser hull, it can go through a wormhole, which means that T3s are able to, you can put 200 of them through a large wormhole. You can actually put 255 if you wanted to. They can go anywhere basically in the galaxy on relatively short notice and swing any fight by projecting a lot of power and bringing a really super serious doctrine to a fight. So there was sort of the feeling that they were too mobile, too small, and too good. So I'm sure there were other design reasons for adjusting them, but a lot of people complained that like a T3s out of wormholes was becoming too oppressive. You could talk to Elise about that. He probably has more info on that.
And another little interesting bit about the strategic cruisers, which kind of merits a rebalance, is as Seamus was saying, there are a lot of different options and variants that you can choose. There are 5 subsystems, and there's different variants of those. So, like, theoretically, you could have hundreds of different, actually thousands of different like configurations. But it turns out people just kind of min-max the whole thing since they've been around for so long, and everyone basically just uses the exact same bits. And in that configuration, they outshine and overpower the hacks, which is what kind of people used to fly. So they're just better than one certain ship class, and in spite of their near unlimited variety, everyone just flies it the same exact way, more or less.
By hack, he means heavy assault cruiser.
Yeah, what a lot of people who haven't been playing the game for very long don't realize is that, Zealots and Cerberuses and things like that used to actually be like frontline ships. You'd see them flying all over nullsec, and then I can't remember exactly when it was. I think it was in like 2010 or 11. I know that there was a huge push inside of PL to get everybody fly, with the skills to get to a certain doctrine. And the first time that you really saw what T3s could do was the Thundercat doctrine, which was like missile Tengus. And they were so effective and so ridiculously overpowered compared to like anything they came up against. they were flying, these things against the old Northern Coalition, and you put a wall of these, these Thundercats up against, 150 Maelstroms, and they were just blapping them, blapping them, blapping them, blapping them, and the buffers were so much on them that they couldn't alpha them off the field, and the scimitars would just repair them. And it took actually like 4 or 5 engagements before they actually blew up one of these Thundercats and understood what PL was doing, and that kind of started the T3 arms race, as it were, and people started to realize that if they actually trained for these things, and they've been in the game for a couple of years already, but if people actually put the effort into them, then they could be a valid frontline doctrine. So it's all PL's fault, really.
You hear that? You hear that, Elise?
I didn't do it.
So they made that, and how long ago was that? When did that actually shift like that?
Sometime around 2010 or 11. I can't. It happened. I mean, Elise, you were there. I can't remember. I mean, it was about maybe 6 or 8 months before we joined PL, but you guys had been running those things to great effect up against the old Northern Coalition before they basically got burned down.
So that puts it at what, like 2010 or
11-ish, I think.
Yeah, between 2010 and 2011, somewhere around there. And it was hilarious. When we went to use them, the Alliance Executor actually theory crafted the fit for the Tengus, and everyone was like, what? No, these are too expensive. Like, if we die, we're going to lose skill points. Like, we can't do that. No one would ever, in their right mind, use this as a fleet comp. And then we did.
Yeah, so you guys were even not believers until somebody proved that it could happen.
Yeah.
So what? So that comes. Okay, so these ships come out in 2008. No, so 2009. Or was it 10? No, it was 2009.
2009.
Yeah, and they're
Because
around.
I joined in the middle of Apocrypha.
Yeah, that was Apocrypha. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're around for a while. I want to talk about Apocrypha, by the way, but they're around for a while. People are using them in wormholes, which is kind of where they come from, because they're made out of materials from there. And then it isn't until PL decides these things are great as a fleet, because they're kind of supposed to be individual ships, I imagine. Was that how you guys were thinking about it? Celine?
I think that what the the thing behind it was that Tech 3 cruisers were supposed to be the beginning of like the next stage of technology in Eve. They had the Tech 2 ships, which were basically just a little bit better and a little bit more resistant than normal ships, and they were all basically, they looked the same, but they had like extra fins or whatever on them, and their stats were a bit better. Tech 3s were supposed to be, something a step beyond that, something that gave players a bit more customization, to the point as the ships, even looking different when you customize them. And I remember that balancing them was, of course, a giant challenge, but by far one of the most hilarious things was the strain that it put on the art departments of both CCP and Atlanta. Basically, the World of Darkness team shut down for almost 4 months while they were helping build the art assets for 5 different configurations of 4 different types of strategic cruisers. It was hilarious. But eventually, there were supposed to be, Tech 3 destroyers and Tech 3 cruise, or Tech 3 frigates and so on and so forth. But I think that after they saw the amount of effort that it took to bring them in and balance them, and the amount of, and the challenges that they had, that they just kind of took their foot off the gas. Oh, and then they started building space Barbies and, stuff like that too. So that kind of put a damper on things as well.
Well, yeah, I've heard, it's hearsay, because I heard from somebody that Apocrypha was like the most expensive expansion that they had done up to date, and as far as design cost and all that. And I did hear, I read in Eon Magazine, which is a magazine that used to come out about Eve, which was terrific, by the way, that Apocrypha was kind of a combination of everything going right. Like a lot of, things just kind of fell into place. A lot of resources were pulled from Atlanta. And so they kind of got this thing off the ground, which was huge if you think about it, because they introduced wormholes and T3 at the same time. So it's interesting to kind of hear the background on that, like what that was like. So this was supposed to be the next wave of what ships were to look like. So you had your Tech 1s that were basic, you had Tech 2s that were advanced, and then you had Tech 3s, which were mutations. that were supposed to be even more advanced, and that just you guys couldn't sustain the development that it took to make all these variations, huh? And it would have been a balancing nightmare, I imagine.
Well, it wasn't just I couldn't begin to imagine all of the thoughts that went on whenever these things hit and they saw, what players were doing with them and everything. But I can definitely say that as to what you said earlier about Apocrypha being expensive, yes, in terms of technical debt, they managed to get this thing out and, put wormholes on the server and all these other things. But they spent the next year cleaning up code and bugs and everything from it. So I can only imagine what that was like. But as far as going forward from there with other ship classes and stuff, it wasn't just ships. I mean, they were looking at doing like modular modules and guns. Like, you'd have like a 425 railgun that could have like 3 different configurations that maybe one you could put it together and it would give you a shield resistance bonus or something along those lines. I mean, there were all kinds of ideas for Tech 3 stuff on the drawing boards. It wasn't just ships. But I don't know if we'll ever see any of that or if they're too scared of, what people will do with them to even attempt it.
By the way, for those members of the audience who actually haven't seen the proposed patch changes yet, I just put a link in the Twitch text chat to meta.eveonline.com, so you can read up on what the new subsystems are going to be.
Wild. Okay, so that's the background for Tech 3 and where it was supposed to go. And of course, that didn't turn out that way. Instead, they made a new type of Tech 3 that doesn't rely on different parts. It seems like it's easier on the design team and it's easier on the balanced teams that work on that because it only has 3 options instead of 6. So T3's kind of sat there. T3 cruisers kind of sat there for a while, still overpowered, still eclipsing other doctrines, and until finally enough pressure or enough time was freed up for CCP to change it. So what are those changes? Who wants to talk about those?
Well, just as a broad strokes of it, and then Asher and then Apotnik can go in on more detail. It seems like a lot of what they're doing is they're removing a little bit of power and a little bit of tank and a little bit of utility from these ships. So ships like the Proteus right now, if you were to hop on Tranquility before the patch, you have a very durable platform that can hit up to 70 or 80 kilometers. It is afterburning with a small signature and has 2 to 3 utility mids, depending on how you fit it. So it's doing a lot of things at the same time, and that's the sort of stuff that's getting nerfed a bit, or we'll call it getting nerfed. So the Proteus, once this patch comes in, obviously right now we don't have the benefit of time to come up with a lot of good fits and stuff, but from the onset of it does look kind of unviable for the way that it's being flown right now. Like, it's either going to go too slow, or the signature is going to be too big, or the damage is going to be too low, stuff like that. So you're going to have to pick and choose which one you're going to do. So it can't just be a Swiss Army knife. It's going to actually be one of those little things, and it's probably going to end up being the corkscrew.
So the way I'd put it is that previously T3s could be equipped with an array of subsystems such that if we think about all of the base attributes that just make a ship broadly good in EVE, EHP, decent damage, decent projection, SIG, like all of those very broad things are good. You could have all of those at once. So for the price, it was very, very good. Now, with them being made fatter, them being made a bit slower, there is now a lot more real choice between, do I want this or this? I cannot have both. I can have damage or tank in some cases. Basically, they are now much less strong in a broad sense. They can still be very strong in very specific senses, but they're much less strong as being those broad ships. I think you can still do them as those broad ships. We've been looking at some fits that they can still fill that role, but it's to the point where you have to spend a ridiculous amount of money putting them anywhere close to their old abilities. You got to full X type that motherfucker and all that kind of shit.
Yeah, I'm looking at the the Loki prices and how they've skyrocketed, just as a visual reference for people watching the show.
That's the market saying that they think the Lokis are winning out of this round.
The Lokis actually look legit good.
That's the general feeling. And the Loki was easily the worst T3 before the patch, so there's probably the least amount of stock of any of the T3s out there.
Yeah, personally, I use the Loki for a couple of different things. I used to use them in incursions for the extra web range, and sometimes when I go on my bookmarking trips outside of HiSec, I like being sneaky. So Covops and Interdiction nullified.
Yeah, it looks like the Loki is kind of the big winner, along with the Legion, and the Proteus over all other ships is the big loser. Like the Proteus is getting beat down the hardest, it would seem.
Proteus and the Tengu got gutted pretty hard, and yeah, the Proteus probably even worse than the Tengu, but the Tengu's in a very bad spot too.
I've heard some things about this, but let's talk about doctrines and if there are going to be changes, what you suspect changes will happen. Are people going to start getting out of these ships, or are they going to get into them even more?
Just as an expectation, I fully expect that we'll see in the micro gangs and the small gangs, we're going to see a little bit more Lokis in there because they're a cool ship now, and they can synergize really well with a small group of pilots, more so than a large group of pilots, I think. Though the large group is possible, but I think they'll really shine in the small to medium setting. The Proteus, I think, we'll basically never see in space unless you're doing some solo exploration. I don't expect any of the gangs to fly Proteuses. I think they're just going to be mothballed forever. And if you do take them, they're probably just going to be just scram platforms, similar to what a Lachesis used to be back in the day. A Lachesis is a recon ship that used to augment heavy assault cruisers for their tackle range bonuses. So you might see those, but I still doubt it. I still think people will fly strategic cruisers, the T3s, in large fleet fights. But it's going to be very painful, and it's going to be very limited into what they can do. The reason people will fly them is they're still better than hacks, oddly enough.
After all
And
this,
you can still, after all this, they're still better. And you can take them through wormholes, which is a good way to sort of roam around in EVE Online across big distances. So if you tackle a Rorqual or something in a region very far from yours, you can take these ships. They're not going to win a strategic fight for you necessarily, but they can hold their own in a medium setting, and we'll probably end up seeing more Lokis and Legions rather than Proteuses and Tengus.
it's funny. Is looking at the market, it doesn't seem like. I mean, let's go to Proteuses here. They seem to be doing not as well, but they do seem to be up in price. So people haven't read the notes apparently.
Oh well, they've changed the drop rate in wormholes for certain T3 parts, so everything should be going up in price.
Okay, so the market confidence isn't a sign of power; it's a sign of the production costs going up. Okay. Well, what do you guys think? What are your opinions on these changes?
Cautious optimism on my part.
Sounds about right. I'm cautiously optimistic that PL will stop calling them armor hacks for some confusing reason.
That was me. Sorry. Okay, so when we first did it, we called them AHAC 2.0 because they're like the logical progression of AHAC.
That's right.
But no, I'm pretty sure. I'm with Botany. I think see cautious optimism in this one. I do think more balance needs to be done to the game. Like it can't just be like, okay, we're doing these, and then we'll see again in a year. I really want to see hacks buffed a little bit, or at least have their role looked into again, because I'd love to see fleet doctrines composed of hacks and T3s, depending on what you want to do. So like just pretend you've got like a little dial for like if you take 30% hacks, 70% T3s, you can do this. But if you dial it to like 60% hacks and 40% T3s, you could do something completely different, because the hacks would bring you like utility and stuff like that. I think that would be really cool. That's my dream.
At least the classical hack fleet will never come back because it was based on ignorance. Like it was based on people not knowing how to comp their fleets, and you cannot take away sort of institutional knowledge from Eve. It's too late to do that. So, people are not going, unless they stop existing, people are not going to stop bringing 10 really tough to kill Webbers. That's just going to be the case. So you're gonna never get to a case, or never get back to a place where sig tanking really close to someone in a prepared battle is probably a viable strategy. So I don't think the armor hack especially can ever make its way back as sort of what it used to do, which was, sig tank maelstrom fleets and stuff like that.
Well, I just want to see the hacks balanced to a point where they are useful, because as you said, sig tanking can't really work. It can in some instances, right? The way you do it is, if people are taking a lot of webbing ships, you just take a lot of battleships until they get lazy and stop taking webbing ships, because the guys that are webbing are like, I feel lazy. And then you just switch it up on them. But it is hard to do in this era of Eve when people have a lot of intel and stuff like that.
This has worked for us for the last 10 years, and we're going to keep using it.
Whoa.
Couldn't understand you, man.
I was making a joke. This has worked for us the last 10 years, and we're going to keep using it.
Okay.
Well, the
They
one
should
thing
take a big swing at something. Go, swing for the fences sometimes. I appreciate that.
Amen.
Yeah, the one thing that I think is interesting though is that CCP has put one major carrot out in front of these things, and that is that you can swap the rigs now, which is a feature that no other ship has. And despite everything Elise has said, I am curious to see if that is going to keep people in these ships past maybe what their actual usefulness is or not. But it is something that that perked my attention whenever I heard about what all these changes were. Is they were going to finally let you actually remove your rigs and get that way you can repackage them and take them elsewhere and then put them back together. And I'm kind of curious to see if anybody can come up with like some Swiss Army comps, for like more in generalized type of stuff instead of being so specialized. If you can swap the rigs around and the configurations around without having to stick to like one particular configuration with one particular rig set.
It just proves that Elo Knight was ahead of the game. He was just 3 years too early for hacking a box.
It also just is one more design decision to put additional pressure on the salvage market, because the salvage is needed to make the rigs. The fact that you can swap them out and change them means that people who take the time to invest in buying a Loki, for example, are going to probably buy at least 2 or 3 sets of rigs and might even get more. They're probably more likely to get a Tech 2 rig than they would have been if they knew they were going to lose them. It was going to be, forever married to the hull. And that's just more and more salvage being used in an already tight market.
It is really cool to mention that you guys can, or the new strategic cruisers can remove their rigs, because now the ship feels more like an investment than you're just buying a ship, right? Because before you would buy a Tengu or something, or a Proteus, and you'd be like, well, I have to decide right now what I want to use it for, because if I want to put Tech 2 rigs on this thing, and then I change what I want to use it for later, I'm going to have to destroy these rigs, and that's kind of a huge bummer. And
Yep.
the Tech 2 rigs kind of give it a nice little oomph, right? That's the advantage of the strategic cruisers in some regards over Tech 2 ships, because it's got 3 rig slots as opposed to 2. So you can really buff up and shore up the things that are lacking. Now you can do that, and you can just pop the ship off. The ship's going to be a little bit more expensive, but you can just pop the rigs off and put them back on. So it's going to feel more like I don't know, it kind of feels like a poor man's carrier in a way, because a carrier can do so much stuff, and the strategic cruiser will be able to do a lot of different things, and you'll be able to pimp it out in the rigs. So you'll be able to invest more into it, and that sort of lends itself to being more used in small and medium gangs rather than large gangs, which is probably a welcome change for a lot of people in New Eden.
Let's not forget the much higher level of comedy lost mills we're going to see now, with people having rigs that are not fit but are in the cargo or in the hold.
Yeah.
The ancillary benefit. No one is happier about the subsystem cargo bay and removable rigs than me. My guys generally hate me because I make them carry like 48 modules in their cargo bay just to be prepared right now. So given more options to be more adjustable, it just makes me happier. And it's definitely something that when I started doing it at sort of such a autistic level, people, it wasn't really common, but more and more, when you start seeing like brave newbies carrying 3 or 4 refits, it just shows how much the game evolves and how people, pick up on good strategies, and then the level of a commitment and knowledge needed to perform at a high level gets better and better. So we're probably going to see people doing that where they're running, they have 2 or 3 subsystems available to switch around, and maybe some rig changes. So it's going to be fun, I think. And I also am cautiously optimistic about the future of the T3. Basically, as far as I'm concerned, anytime they can take a doctrine and remove resists and add EHP. So sorry, raw HP is what I'm going for. It's better because it means that it's more likely that you can punch through a ship without having to shoot the Logi first, which I think is a good change.
And just dovetailing off of what Asher was saying, it is really cool to see how Eve has evolved into being so prepared when they undock, because there are many instances in Eve's past where we as in BPL would wait to see what the enemy was flying, and then we'd just take the exact counter to it, because they would have either a lot of people and we'd be at a numbers disadvantage, or we just always wanted to take the best ship to be prepared. And now the meta really has shifted where everyone brings sort of everything at the same time, so no one can be like completely outpicked on the fleet stage, right? So no one's going to instantly lose. It's going to be, if they lose, it's going to be decision based or backbone based or something like that.
Yeah, all right, guys. Fit 3 kinetic hardeners, and we'll see if these Tengus work against us.
Yeah, exactly.
Celine?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to kind of bring this around, like what Elise was saying with regard to, like, what you're going to run into. I mean, this is something, if you've been if you're part of an alliance, moves around a lot or does a lot of smaller and medium stuff, especially, not just in nullsec, like what mine does and a few others do, and even PL to an extent. It's theory crafters have always been looking for, that particular, that doctrine that would maybe allow you to do more than one thing with a particular type of ship. And, the moment that they said that they were going to allow the removal of rigs, I mean, that kind of like made a lot of us, whoa, hey, well, maybe now you can make that, that Tengu that can do, oh, no, it's missiles. Oh, shit, now they're using rails. No, they're tanked against this or that or whatever. I'm kind of excited about the, the versatility that might be available here now because of that one, quote unquote small change, but actually allows you to have a very large amount of options. And yes, Asher, that's Asher just posted quite a funny picture in chat that fits this discussion quite well.
I'll post it for people watching. What about the actual building of these things? Does anybody have any reference on that, like how hard it's going to be to make these things? Okay.
I have no
so
idea.
That's what I get for picking FCs.
I mean, I know it's going to be a little bit more expensive. They changed the way they're built a bit, so there's a new like logjam in the production of it instead of the old one. But I can't guess to see what it's going to be. I imagine they're going to be a little bit more expensive, but since you need fewer subsystems, maybe the price is going to be very, very similar. I don't know.
It is one of the nice things about Eve is that you can. I remain actively ignorant about how spaceships are built, and I have no need to do so. Like, I mean, I don't need to learn anything about building a spaceship. I do really enjoy that there are people whose whole game involves building or creating spaceships, and I can just pay ISK and never have to learn anything about it. Which is, other games you have to learn something about crafting or something like that. I've always appreciated that Eve does not require that.
Yeah, I can talk about Tech 1 manufacturing in some detail, and I can talk about Capital and Tech 2 manufacturing on a very high level, not being able to go into details. I can't even talk about Tech 3 manufacturing on the high level because I don't understand that yet.
I just say that they do spooky, weird stuff in wormholes, and then a Tech 3 a ship is born from that ether. Wormhole people are weird anyway.
A new wormhole opens and Tech 3 ships just come out fully formed.
Oh, I thought it stork.
That's exactly how that happens.
Yeah, it has a headache and it breaks its head open and out comes Athena. Okay, so I do know there is going to be some changes to it that have obviously made the prices go up and stuff. And there's, you'll probably be reading about some of that stuff. I think there was an ingredient that's new that's going to be out there that is already in the game or will be in a day or two before the changes hit. So, all right, so that's what we had on T3, and I want to dovetail into CCP's new announcement that they are listening to the players. And so there was a video that came out. We won't play it here, but you can see it on CCP's YouTube. It has Siegel basically saying they're going to create a new team that's going to be doing nothing but ship balance in the future. And the other part of the announcement was that they were going to look into some of the stuff that people had been grumbling about, which was how structures defend themselves and how they're overpowered and those kinds of things. What did you guys think of those announcements?
I'm super excited about it. I'm on my own podcast and on podcasts I've been visiting. I've been talking about they need to have a balanced team for ships, and it's just crazy that they don't change ships until it's super obvious that there's a huge problem. That's not a good way to develop the game. It also leads to a stagnant game. You look at other games like League of Legends where they do balance changes every 2 weeks. It's not possible in Eve, but it keeps the game fresh because your knowledge is never just totally 100% accurate because there's always something new to learn. So if Eve adopts something like that where you have quarterly balance changes, it's an overall great thing for the game. And I understand that Jin Tan, who is a discount store Apothny, has been working very hard on the CSM to get that done. So,
Whoa!
Got to defend Jin Tan. Oh, it's okay.
No, he's a cool dude. I do like to give him a hard time though. Anyway, he's been working hard. I think that's like his pet issue, and so he's probably been bringing it up all the time on the CSM. So. I think it's a great change. I would like to know the details. Like, is this team going to be solely focusing on that, or is this like 10% of their time? Like, I don't know, but any step forward here is a positive.
So, I think that one of the things that a lot of people probably don't realize is that for the longest time, the only time you got balance changes or passes were during the big expansions when they came out every, like 6 to 8 months. So you didn't even get what we have had in the last few years, which are, incremental changes every, 3 or 4 months. Having a balanced team is something that I think that everybody's been scrambling for a long, long time. And it's depending upon how they put it together and who they put in it, assuming that these are devs that actually, play Eve actively and interact with the CSM and, other players, it could be a really, really good thing. If, they follow the pattern of old where they would rotate devs in and out of this team. So, like everybody gets a chance to experience this, then, I'm not gonna hold my breath. But if it's a dedicated, small group of people that is connected to the community and actually is active in the game and can make changes based upon things that they actually see, not just hear about third party on Reddit or because someone, made a big post on Kugu or whatever, then this is a great thing. And I'm glad to see that they're finally moving forward with it, at least to a point where it's actually getting the profile that it's getting whenever Seagull's announcing it in the video.
Go ahead, Asher.
No, dude, I'm
You're
just
trolling us.
Yes, please go ahead.
Damn it. All right,
please go.
My reaction to the Seagull video was just delight at the polish of it as well. In contrast to recent dev communication from CCP, where there were ad hoc comments put up on places like Reddit, this was carefully thought out and polished and really well presented on camera. Very well worded, very well stated, just polished. And I don't want to say anything to discourage the people who communicate ad hoc on forums, because that's actually really difficult to do and really painful. I appreciate those devs who can do it, uh, uh, I'm a game dev in RL, and my team absolutely hates to go up and post on the forums, and they get treated like crap whenever they do. And but it's nice to see the really professional communication again. Also, if we get this team and they are connected to the community and they do communicate with us on an ad hoc basis, please, it is in your best interest as a player base to treat them really well, treat them nicely so they continue to do it and don't just all slit their wrists.
Yeah. Well, it is a change from the spring a few weeks ago where it seems that everything that they did was antagonizing the player base or the vocal player base, not necessarily all of them. And one thing I brought up earlier on the Open Comms show, which you can catch on Friday nights, the same channel, was that they seem to be saying, we hear you, and they were talking to the players that were actually really noisy. And so I wonder if there's a segment of the population that is not being heard because they're not the ones complaining. Like people who are interested in PvE or think the game is kind of fine and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's one thing you do learn about Eve when you play for a long time is that we kind of really are the minority. By we, I mean like the PvP nullsec people who just PvP all the time and live in nullsec full time. The longer and longer I play this game, the more often I notice that there are, for every one of me, there's going to be like 10 other dudes who play very casually. Maybe not 10, but there's a lot of other dudes who play very casually in either high sec or low sec, and they just want nothing to do with what I do, and it just boggles my mind. But just going back really quick to the point of the balance team and how that's going to exist. Just if you want an idea of how that could exist, when CCP Fozzy and CCP Rise first started working at CCP, they kind of got thrown to doing a lot of balance stuff. And I remember I was on the CSM at the time, and I remember having this conversation with them because I really wanted them to balance capitals and stuff. I was like, so you're going to balance every frigate, every cruiser, every battle cruiser, and battle, and you're just going to go ahead and do that like right now, and you're not going to balance caps? And they're like, yeah, we think it's good for the game. I was like, silly CCP. And then they did it, and it completely reinvigorated how this game is being played. Basically every ship that you're flying right now, and no matter where you are in low sec or high sec or wormhole space, and as long as you're PvPing, every ship that you're flying right now was balanced in that sort of balance pass era, and it was absolutely fantastic. So if we can get that happening more and more often, it was going to become a much more dynamic and fun place to be in.
And not just the ships, they also did the modules.
Yeah, exactly. They did module tier side, and it was absolutely fantastic. Maybe if you guys haven't been playing E for a long time, but when CCP Fozzy and CCP Rise were there at that time, they were like the golden boys of CCP. They could do no wrong, and it's just so heartbreaking to see how a lot of that has changed in the mind of some of these players. And take it back to Carneros' point, you do have to be constructive when you're interacting with these people. Because poor CCP Fozzy, I think he's immune to it, but everyone else isn't. So like people were just blasting poor CCP Fozzy during I can't remember what it was. I think it was the carrier nerf or something. And the very next day was a Saturday morning. He went on to do. He spent 7 hours sitting in front of his computer to do the feeder rounds for the Alliance tournament in his off time. Like he did that just because he loves the people who play the game, in spite of them calling Aegis stuff Fozzy Sov and using it as a bad word and stuff.
Yeah.
So you're allowed to be mad. Here's the thing: you're allowed to be mad at the game, but at least be constructive when you're talking to people. Otherwise, that relationship that makes Eve so wonderful, the relationship between the devs and the player base, which is really special in Eve Online. If you play other games, you don't always see this, and you almost never see it. We just got to keep that going, because Eve is a much better place when the devs are happy to talk to the players. Whether they're angry or sad, it doesn't matter, but as long as they're being constructive, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I liked what you said one time. Fozzy's like a robot. What do you call him? robot human or something.
Yeah,
That's hilarious.
some sort of robot human. He's a cyborg. Let's just call it what it is.
He can take so much punishment and keep going, and he calculates stuff so fast in his head that it's hard to argue with him. That's probably one of the reasons people get frustrated. But what an amazing person! Yeah.
Here's this is sort of a tangent, but people are always like, oh, thanks to these CCP devs for spending their own time to run the tournament. Why does CCP not support the tournament? Like, why aren't they paying their devs to run something that's like really good for their game? Like, clearly it drives player engagement, and it's the biggest streaming event of the year for Eve. It's the only time that Eve gets in the front page of Twitch. Like, why are we? And every year I hear the same thing. Oh, these devs are sacrificing their personal time to run the Alliance tournament. Why are they not? Why are they not paying the people to do work on their game? I do not get this. It doesn't make sense to me. And yeah, thank you, devs. Thank you, devs, for doing this that we all enjoy. But let me just say that you should be getting paid for it.
The reason is because it would be hugely disruptive to their cadence of releases if they were to do that. What would happen is they would have to take at least one sprint in probably 2 sprints in the middle of the summer, and they would have to stop planning their release stuff and instead plan tasks related to AT, and it would get expensive that way. But if they just keep and the reality is they're probably planning slightly light for these 2 sprints anyway, so that they have the bandwidth to do side stuff in their own time.
To further answer that, my understanding when I went there to do the AT, the 2 times that I went, is that the devs aren't not paid. So if they work all Saturday or Sunday on the tournament, that means they can take Monday and Tuesday off. So like the time is comped and it's considered part of their job. And if anything, I'd say that we have more CCP investment in the tournament than certainly since I started being involved in tournament things, and that we have a dev whose like title is tournament guy, right? That's CCP Logibro. We've got the nice big fancy TV studio in the offices, which admittedly, yeah, that's used for Eve TV as well, but it's certainly an asset that had to be part of the equation. Do we want to build this? Oh, we can use it for tournament stuff as well as the Eve TV show. I mean, I'm sure at least will remember the first year we did it. We were in a converted boxed meeting room with about 1,000 million degree lights shining off us, and the casting booth was just kind of this sweaty mess that was like a monsoon in Florida. Whereas now it's a lovely kind of TV studio. Everything's laid out. They've got a command and control center. They've got way more people able to work on the behind the scenes, doing all the camera work and stuff. So I'd say that CCP certainly do invest. Like the meme that CCP don't put any money into the tournament and it's just devs doing it when like Hilmar isn't looking in the offices or something is a complete lie. Like there is a fairly significant budget and the devs do get a certain level of support to what they're doing with the tournament.
Yeah. And also maybe it's I wonder how many. Do you guys know how many people watch it?
Between the peak numbers are between 6,000 and 9,000, depending on the moment in the day. Last year was a little bit lower. I think it peaked at somewhere around 8,000, but it has gotten to 10,000 before in the past.
I've seen a number over 10K.
Yeah.
All right, but basically let's say 10 to 15,000 players. So it's not a niche. It's kind of a good chunk of
it's the biggest Eve streaming event, unless there's like a BTACR or similar level battle happening.
It gets us onto the front page of Twitch, which is pretty cool.
Right. I mean, it's the only time that happens. Like I said, barring those very rare battles.
Just to grab a question in chat, Cruiser asks or mentions that if CCP focused more on the AT, they could potentially make millions. Just look at Dota. And how other games do it. Just to touch on that, Dota and those MOBA games are balanced around the competitive scene. The Alliance Tournament for Eve Eve doesn't balance around the Alliance Tournament, and I'm glad they don't, because it's just this random set of rules and an instance and a game where rules don't usually exist. I think it's insanely cool and a great mental exercise to do the Alliance tournament, and very fun to watch. But it can't be an esport. I'm
The-
sorry, like
The strong esports are the ones where the core gameplay of the game is the esport itself. So when you play League, you're playing the same league that the pros are playing at a lower skill level. In StarCraft 2, in Dota 2, that is all the same. Whereas in EVE, the Alliance tournament is this like niche activity that until recently was actually basically impossible to simulate unless you were actually flying in the tournament on the day.
Yeah, but it is very fun, and I do hope everyone watches it. And the competitive scene has gotten really robust in the last 2 years. A lot of the credit for that goes to both CCP for creating a Thunderdome server and really buying into the Alliance tournament. The Thunderdome server is their event server, which is completely separated from the testing server and Tranquility. And people like EVE and even the Imperium News Network with their Anger Games thing have a lot of competitive esports things going on throughout the year, and they're actually quite exciting. Not to toot my own horn here, as well as Apophines, but they're very exciting and very fun to watch. The EVE Championship Series. It's like a 5-on-5 fight where there's like a drafting segment, and it's just really fun to watch these pilots grow and rivalries form and mistakes being made and clowny things happening, like just ridiculous shit that you would never see, or it's hard to see in E.
I think to add to that, one of the benefits of stuff like the Anger Games and the Event stuff, so I'd say that the player commentators and our understanding of what makes a good production of EVE Sports is massively improved because of all the extra practice that the commentators get, just as a basic example. But also by having tournaments year round with more people involved from more walks of the game, it means that the average literacy of EVE tournament play among the player base improves, which means that when you have that base understanding, it is far more easy to tune into the Alliance tournament once a year and have a good time with it. If you've been hearing about tournaments all year round and hearing some of the lingo and like, I don't know, like a random goon in on comms in Ash's SIG might be hearing and say, "Oh, we were doing tourney practice, and oh, the Logi is so important." Blah 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 blah. They then watch the Alliance tournament. They know to watch the Logi and how big a deal the Logi is if the Logi dies on one side and it doesn't on the other side.
Yes.
I remember the first time I saw an Alliance tournament, one of the ships that popped up on there that I'd never encountered was a Rook. And then, one doesn't see tons of Rooks running around in space. So then the first time after that I saw one in a PvP situation, my first thought was, oh my God, that's very dangerous. That's from Alliance tournament. Kill that thing. That's very funny. Yeah, it does contribute to your learning about the game.
Well, at the very least, I think the big draw for me, and I wonder if there's a difference between Alliance tournament and other tournaments as far as spectatorship, because the people who are playing the game, it's great for them. People who are interested in how to fight, if they can understand what's going on, it's great for them too. But for the majority of people, I think it's not that exciting unless you're rooting in some way for somebody, and then you become a fan, and then it's actually worth watching, and then it's worth betting on, and then it's worth talking with other people about who's going to win and predicting and stuff, because you have something to meet around, a common language. So that's why the Alliance tournament has that extra layer of, I don't know what's going on, I don't know what the ships are, I don't really know the rules, but I do know that this is my team and that's who I'm going for. And so you get the advantage of the alliances being the teams rather than just individuals. I think it opens it up.
That is the exact reason for the past 2 years I've been publishing my team summaries. So I've made them for 3 years. The first year I made them, I just kept them for myself. But then I realized how much of the engagement for people is rooting for their team or listening and hearing about the stories of other teams. So each year I put up this big list so everybody can get a feel for who they're watching in each match, even if it's not their own team. Like, it's not just random alliance name versus random alliance name. This is the Russians from the east who have done this in the tournament before against the guys that actually live adjacent to me in Catch. I guess I live in Catch too, so I'm going to root for the guys who also live in Catch, or
Yeah.
I fight them all the time. I'm going to root against them because I hate them or whatever. So I think it's really important that we, as much as possible, try to share the stories of these alliances, and also for the alliances themselves, it means that they have a huge opportunity to make a name for themselves. Like in, say, Null PvP, it's very difficult to make a name for yourself if you're just being sat on the face of by PL all day. But in the Alliance tournament, if you've got 10 dudes or 20 dudes, if you practice internally, that really, really care, then you can make an amazing, amazing reputation for yourselves. Like Test. Like when Test was at the height of their we're bad at the game and we should be bad at the game and being bad at the game is what we want. Their AT team was just a small core of guys from a huge alliance that really cared, that really put the effort in. And Test has had a fantastic AT team, despite their reputation on Tranquility, for years now.
Yeah, I will say this, and then we can wrap up and start moving to game news. A lot of stuff's kind of happening in the game. The Alliance tournament is a really good way for alliances to get recruits, because if you perform well there, your name gets out there. And then I think in EVE, people are attracted to success. And so then you start to, I know when I watched Pandemic Legion and RUR fighting, I think it was AT6, I was like, wow, RUR is great, but I probably can't join them since they're a small team and obscure and from, where were they from? Like Hungary or somewhere. So I'll make my goal to join PL one day. Like that'll be my goal. And that sustains goals in EVE, sustain you. That's why we keep playing, is because we have these goals that we're going for. And I think Alliance
And
Tournament.
you nearly made it, Mattrel.
I almost made it, but I fell short. Yeah. All right. So, at least I'll give you more chance if you want to talk about the Alliance Tournament a bit more. We're about to switch over to game news. You got anything else?
Just one or two small bits. We were talking about CCB's buy-in for the Alliance Tournament. Why they don't see it more? CCB did sort of embolden EVE-NT and gave EVE-NT the feeder rounds, which was a new thing this year. And EVE-NT will be broadcasting the first 2 weekends of the Alliance Tournament, and CCB will be broadcasting the last 2 weekends of the Alliance Tournament. So the Alliance Tournament will now be essentially 5 weekends instead of 3 or 4, as it has been previously. So it's kind of more spread out a little bit. And if you're interested in the prizes, CCB Seagull's video does have a few glimpses of what we might be able to see. We saw like a pretty cool looking Nemesis and a pretty cool looking Arazu hull. They haven't come out and said that's what the prizes are going to look like, but it's kind of a pretty strong hint and a nice little look at them.
All right, cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, so let's talk about game news. What's going on out there? We have a few things that we've listed. We did cover Alliance Tournament stuff already, so we'll just skip that. But top of the list has to be there's a lot of activity in the Gehi area. And apparently some stuff going on in Aquarius as well. So there's. Go ahead.
I'd say a couple things about that. Yeah. Although sometimes the summertime does end up being low activity levels, and a lot of PvPers are focused on Alliance Tournament, which we're not bringing up again. In contrast, this year there have been folks who moved down to an engagement distance and are nearby. So Gehi is the current staging system for Northern Coalition DOT. We won't, your home alliance, Matterall. Love that.
Careful how you tread.
No.
Just kidding.
So they're right nearby. They're not close enough to drop on our home systems in the Imperium, but they're only one in between, so one hop in between. So that's a great engagement range. They are within drop range of parts of Aquarius. So there's stuff going on in Aquarius. We've got Pandemic Horde down in the area. We got some other folks. And Aquarius is not as densely populated and doesn't have as high activity defense modifiers defending it as Delve has. So it's a much smaller elephant to try to chew, so to speak. So there's activity going on there. It's not super serious. It's just fun, but it's PvP in the area, and it's serious enough to draw an engagement without being serious enough to like ruin your day.
Yeah, it is. it's a very active time for that area and the people involved, including NC Dot. Maybe we have Travis Muskrat out there, FC for U.S. time zone for NC Dot. Maybe we'll have him on the show so he can talk about what's going on down there. Been doing a bunch of his fleets. But it does seem like there's definitely something to do just about every day. There's kind of more pressure now to fleet up than I've seen in a long time to get out there and to participate because there are things that they want to get done.
There's another similar hotspot. In addition to the Canid Aquarius border area, the Curse Catch border has some stuff going on there too. In fact, there was a bait Astrohoos that was online during our show this morning, and there was a decent sized fight over there. The Citadel did not successfully online, but it did draw a nice fight, which was the purpose in the first place.
Is that a nice way of saying you killed it, or that nobody turned on the switch?
No, there was a form up on both sides for it. It was dropped more or less by the Space Violence SIG. It didn't survive. So the Imperium lost strategically on that one.
So it was yours that you put down. Okay.
Yeah, broadly speaking.
All right.
Not that I wasn't in the combat while on the show, though, because I don't multitask that well.
Neither do I. That's why all these things are happening on screen that shouldn't be.
Yeah, the South is really ablaze with a lot of activity. It seems like all the PvPers have moved down towards the South, and are just making it their playground right now. A lot of the playing is going on in Providence, Ketch, and Quirius. It's kind of cool to see strategically how these alliances that live in the South are dealing with it. I think the goons are probably dealing with it the best. They've littered Dell with so many keep stars and Fortizars that no one even wants to consider taking it. But they've kept Quirius like a nice little playground, so people will maybe want to come in and do some fighting there. And they're not dropping a bunch of caps on absolutely everybody. Interestingly enough, NC Dot and PL, when they moved, they did move without their super capital fleet. So a lot of people who perhaps wouldn't engage or escalate against PL and NC Dot are doing just that. We see Providence, especially escalating all the time with dreads and capitals in their home system, and sometimes even super caps. We've seen brave newbies drop super caps on PL, knowing that PL can't re-escalate. So while it does seem like these alliances are fighting with a hand behind their back, they're literally just not bringing the one thing that's going to be a big detractor to fighting. So I think that's a really interesting dynamic. And while it may not be as interesting as like a serious hell death war or something, it is miles more fun than that. So if you actually are interested in PvPing, there's a lot of stuff going on in the South all over the place.
It's one of those rare situations in EVE where having hostile scouts watch your move ops actually worked to their advantage, because they got to see that, look, they didn't move any super caps. They just brought capital ships and subcaps. That kind of scouting and intel in the hands of their opponents actually worked to their advantage, because it meant, we can afford to take some fights and do some more interesting things and embrace them in a completely different manner as they arrive.
Yeah, and a lot of the times the people who moved without the super caps wanted to make it absolutely clear that they moved without super caps. I was flying around through Providence the other day, and I was in a Hyperion, which doesn't have I don't know, it was just a goofy little ship, and I jumped into a small gang, and they all ran. And I was like, why are you running? They're like, you've got a sign, or you're going to drop Titans on us. I was like, okay, I don't have enough time. This warp isn't long enough for me to explain how wrong you are. But it was very frustrating. But that doesn't happen at the fleet level. So that's why you see people, like I was saying, escalating with capitals and having really cool dread slugfest and carrier little wars between carriers and fighter groups, which is pretty immersive and fun gameplay if you haven't done that.
Well, it seems like that's...
Yo, Elise.
Oh, good.
Well, what's up with PL? Ever since Tess memed on you with like 7 Titans, it seems like you guys have basically just stopped doing things. Is that inaccurate?
I believe that's kind of inaccurate. I mean, we just had some pretty large fights going on in the Providence area. It is hard to fight tests, especially when they move around and they kind of come to Test's way to deal with PL, with Villy and stuff like that, because he's a pretty smart guy, is to just not give us good fights or anything like that. And it totally works. And also, Test did move around to do their little stain clearing campaign, and that was kind of out of our sphere of influence. CO2 has been an incredible amount of fun to mess with, because GigX always brings a very unpredictable, very fun fight, and Providence has been a lot more interesting. And given that it's just a little bit closer, actually a whole lot closer, we've just been focusing on that instead of creating timers elsewhere. But there are some surprises in with tests that might come to pass very soon. It might be some really good fun.
Ooh, veiled threats. I love veiled threat.
I mean, it's just gonna be fun times. It's not a veiled threat.
Sorry. I didn't mean to misinterpret.
Not personal.
I love veiled fun times.
I'm a mannered EVE Online player. I don't make veiled threats.
No.
And in the corporation and the alliance adhocracy, they used to say, "We're gentlemen Vikings." But they would come in and destroy everything, but they would do it with a little bit of class.
A little panache.
Yeah. Mustache wax. So another area that's active, it's actually all connected, but we do see some activity, and I'm a bit short on information here, but it looks like Scalding Pass Wicked Creek area. There is a conflict going on that's interesting. Should look into that. It looks like there's a clash of philosophies and a lot of combat going on down there.
A big change. I don't know if you're going to touch on this, but Tri seems to have cut ties with their drone masters and are going to potentially start creating timers out in the drone lands. Who knows?
Yeah, and there's a lot of political movement too that I'm not. I can't talk about it because I'll say something that's wrong, and there's no point in doing that. But there's definitely some alliances shifting, not just combat, but people are upset that Tri has turned on their allies or whatever, and so who knows? It may end up being more even than it looks right now. So yeah, and that's pretty interesting. So conflict up in the east, the renting areas up there in the drone lens. There's conflict in Scalding Pass Wicked Creek area, and of course Aquarius and low security in Amar space near Delve. So a lot of activity in the south. In the north, it looks like it is a lot of money making going on. And in HiSec, I have some information that Horde is in HiSec, kind of muscling people who own, economic structures, stuff like that. So there's a lot of activity going on in EVE Online. So it is quiet because there's no major campaigns, but there definitely is a lot of activity. And I wonder if that wasn't the philosophy of really the last 4 years, is to get people to be in small gangs again and keep the fights smaller rather than these set piece epic struggles for life and death.
I think so, but it does feel like a bit of an identity crisis sometimes, because EVE does seem to love these huge nullsec battles and the sort of the set time type of thing where, we'll bring our big fleet at 2100 EVE on Saturday, we'll see you there type of feel. That vibe always seems to be very EVE and very fun for me. But
meet you at the bike racks after school.
Yeah. I'll grease back my hair with a little comb and pop my collar.
Yeah.
Switchblade comb.
Yeah, there you go.
What's funny is this podcast just came out from Imaginary Worlds podcast. Check it out if you can. It's called World War Eve. And so somebody approached me and said, can you tell me about this game? Because he does a podcast on Imaginary Worlds, not just video games, but many other things. I gave him a backdrop, and then I gave him some names of people to contact. Actually, at least you were in that one. And the podcast was really good. It was a little inaccurate because, of course, he doesn't comprehend all the little rules of EVE. But, man, as a podcast, it really focused on the story of the game and the people, which is exactly where the outside world meets with EVE Online. I don't think anybody who doesn't understand EVE can look at the game and be interested in stats or fittings or any of that stuff. I think the thing that attracts people is the story, and the bigger the story, the better. And so, of course, he wanted to focus on BTAC-R, even though that happened a few years ago. So yeah, those things are still like, we don't, to fight in those fights isn't necessarily the funnest gameplay, but to say that you were there kind of means something. And I think they're working on that balance to make it fun, but also make it important. And that's what's kind of missing, the importance of fighting.
One of my favorite little things about Eve is I was talking about this the other day. I make a lot of alts every kind of the beginning of the year to either put them into groups to spy or just to do a new interesting thing in Eve that I've never done before. And when you're in a smaller group, like right now I'm in a mining group in HiSec, and it is so fun to hear them kind of talking about nullsec politics and talking about a big fight that happened. And it seems like they all have like a side that they root for, and they all have a dog in the race, and and then they meet someone that's been in one of the big fights, they ask them how it is, and it's just kind of a lot of excitement. But it's so hard to keep a round or keep a level head about that. Like it's really, really interesting just to see how the other half lives, and just to see that they have a rooting interest in nullsec politics. I think that's so fun and so interesting, and creates a great dynamic in the game.
To crush their little hearts, PL.
Yeah. Well, like you said, like when you started out, you wanted to join PL. Like when I started out, I was like, I want to join PL. This seems like a good group. I got rejected the first time, so it just made me try harder. It's important to have like these type of goals and things.
Well, I'd say you made it, considering you're one of the senior voices there. Good job. I failed. I flunked out.
That's okay. I got kicked out once and then rejected twice. So
Well, that's awesome. All right. The next, and speaking of podcasts, there is a bunch of podcasts that you can find on EVE Online. I think I saw that on Reddit. It was interesting to see people seeking out podcasts. So there's still a vibrant community that is commuting and wanting to listen to EVE while they drive instead of news. So you go to evepodcast.com, check out the podcast list there. That's where most people's post their podcast.
And
One of my favorite. It's called the Asher Hour. You should check that one out.
Oh,
That's where I was turning. Yeah, Asher Hour is a great podcast. One of my favorites because it is so good at what it's about. And that is
intense nerdiness.
FCing and all the talk about doctrines and piloting. And I just I've been around a while, but I still always learn stuff on that show. Your show, Asher. That's your show.
Well, thank you.
So keep making it.
I'm glad you like it. There's been a lot to talk about lately, so I've been able to do a few episodes. I mean, that's one nice thing about not having a set schedule is if nothing happens in a month, I just don't do one for a month, which I guess can be annoying, but you don't get shows where you're just treading water, which is, unfortunately, sometimes just nothing happens in a week. And so there's nothing to talk about. But right now we've got, all these changes, and so there's lots to talk about, which is nice.
Yeah. Can you someone link Asher Hours podcast in there? Thank you. Dirk McGurk's totally helping us out and putting the links in place. But yeah, it's funny because there are very few podcasts that one person can talk for an hour and it's still a good podcast. I certainly can't do that, but you can. Maybe Dirk can do it too. He's proven it a few times. But the whole hour is like you basically saying what's going on out there. And that was intensely interesting because you're very involved in the wars. You're involved in the doctrines that are being fit and used and why they're being used and what's good about them and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, catch that podcast. You should make more.
So nothing will be better for me than if they do have a balanced team and I can just talk about that, forever. But yeah, if they're doing updates and changes frequently, that's a lot more fodder for me.
Yeah. One other thing, and it was pointed out here, Clueless Space Nerds is a podcast that if you like irreverence is a good one to listen to. So check that out. Anyway, So the reason I bring up the podcasts is that I was pleased that people are seeking them out. So they're still important, and that's kind of why we still put them out. And I love the idea of people who are commuting having something, because such long commutes.
Matter
some
all
people-
about a month ago, someone on Reddit asked, what are good podcasts? You made a really nice, informative post, and Reddit immediately downvoted you to the very bottom of the post. I thought that was good.
Yeah.
The only person who took the time to link all the different podcasts was the one who got downvoted.
Yeah. Well, I always call Reddit's an emotional place, so it's not about what's right or wrong. It's about how you feel. So, yeah. So let's go on. Wrap up the show a little bit early today because we all have commitments we need to get to. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to talk about?
Thank you to the people who donated and subscribed. Thank you to Celine and Apothony who had to duck out a little bit early.
We didn't hit Citadels at all. They did talk about that a bit. So
yes, actually, I did want to before we do our goodbyes. The last subject we'll hit is this video that came out. They talked about Citadels and how they were going to change them. So last 10 minutes, go.
Well, it sounds like they're going to hit void bombs. Like that was the really only concrete thing they said, which is super important because void bombs have basically totally redefined the meta of real, doctrines, and that is, can your doctrine fight without using any cap at all? Because you're going to have to. And Macarios were already the most powerful ship, but the fact that the Macario fits perfectly in that arena made them even more powerful. So it was just reinforcing, a meta that was already bad, and it also made shield ships basically unusable because there's no such thing really, other than maybe like a Scorpion Navy issue, where you can have like a passive shield tank fleet. Actually, a Sleipnir fleet can do that too, but you're talking about very few ships that can really do that. So I don't know what they're going to do. Hopefully that they basically will get rid of void bombs, except maybe on keep stars or something like that, or make them have a much smaller explosion radius, or defender launchers can hit them. They have a lot of options, but the other thing they said they're going to have is they're going to talk with the CSM next month about what to do with, about Citadels to make them better. So that's more open-ended and probably something we won't see for a while, but at least it's positive changes.
Yeah, the hilarious irony with the void bombs and citadels is CCP is always so careful not to influence the meta with a game design change. And they always say, I remember on my terms on the CSM, whenever there was a design or a ship balance panel, and they would say, well, we don't want to balance a ship based on how it's used now because we don't want to influence the meta and how ships are used. So it's okay. But then when the void bombs came out, like they influenced the meta so hard, and they actually made it so there's only certain ships that can work. But I have a feeling they erred on the side of defense with these citadels, which I don't blame them for. I'd rather them make them too strong or too defensively strong than too offensively strong. But hopefully, when we see this iteration, we'll see a lot of the pain points that we've seen and felt over and over and over and over again over a course of weeks will be addressed, and maybe some of the smaller Citadel spam will be dealt with as well.
What do you guys think of the timing, though? Like they were saying all the right things, and then they said, so we'll be discussing this at the summit, which is in August, and then so that no changes are coming until those discussions happen. So this is not going to happen.
A lot of it.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I keep walking over you. I think a lot of it has to do with how CCP works and how Iceland works as a country. During the summer, they have a lot of people take vacations and a lot of people go on extended holidays and stuff like that. That's just the culture of the country, so they can't get too much accomplished during the summertime. And then in the fall, they can push out big strategic ideas and huge goals and put them out in the winter. Perhaps Corneros can say that I'm making this up or saying how it actually works.
Exactly
Since he's actually been there, I'm just kind of guessing.
It's exactly right.
Kind of guessing. You've been there how many times?
more times than I can count on my hands, and as soon as this Alliance tournament is over, more times than I can count with my hands and toes, and I have not lost a digit yet.
Nice. That's interesting. You ever? This is off topic, but actually, are we finished with? Anything else you want to talk about with Citadels?
No, that's been it's been beat to death. Everyone knows what the problems are.
Yeah. Yeah, and so do you have actually, Asher? Do you have some hope they're gonna make some changes?
Do I have hope? I have got lots of hope.
Are you optimistic? Oh, you have hope. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think they will. I mean, I think that you know, CCP is like one of those companies that will just push and push and push and push until they get really strong pushback, and they've reached that point where they're going to have to make changes before they start bleeding people, and they already are. I mean, we can all look at the numbers. We all know that people are stopped playing the game. It's not hidden. Um, and by the way, don't be surprised if we see some kind of World of Warcraft thing where they stop showing you how many people are online at any one time sooner or later, because the numbers are very bad. And I think they're going to start, saying, oh, it's encouraging other people to leave by knowing how many people already are leaving. Anyway, that's just a prediction. But in general, they know they need to make changes. They're trying to milk EVE for as much as they can to build VR sports games, but hopefully they've got to the point where they realize they cannot milk it that hard anymore.
Yeah.
I disagree. But...
Yeah, there are probably differing views on that. But I did want to, before we get into that discussion, I want to get into talking to someone like Elise who travels to Iceland a lot for this game. Do you ever think about like what you're doing? Like, why am I doing this kind of thing?
Yeah, totally. When I first started with the CSM, I was a graduate student and I had an awful lot of free time. So it was no problem. I was like, oh, cool. I get to go to this crazy foreign country that I'd never go to otherwise, because why would anyone go to Iceland? There's not really that much there. Since then, I've learned how great Iceland is, and I was like, oh, this is cool. But then I kind of got an actual job, so all of my vacation time, much to the dismay of my family, was going to Iceland for the Alliance tournament stuff and for FanFest and these EVE meets. But so now I essentially go much less frequently. I go to FanFest, and this year I was able to apply for Alliance tournament commentator. I wasn't able to apply last year because I didn't have the time. And it is one of my favorite things to do, so I get to go again this year. But these EVE meets, I was very skeptical of them the first time I went. I was like, I don't think I relate to all these people so well. And now that I've been to them, I can see that EVE meets are absolutely fantastic. You get to meet the people behind the avatar, and they're shockingly normal. They're not weird. They're not.
They're employable.
Yeah.
That's my criteria.
There you go. Yeah, and they don't even smell that bad. I mean, some of them do, but not all of them. The bulk of them don't. And so I do get a lot of enjoyment from going to these.
What a ringing
meets and
endorsement.
stuff like that. Yeah, they don't smell that bad. EVE Online.
Yeah.
The first time I went to an EVE Online Fan Fest, the then Director of Education, Neville Smith, was saying how strange it was to actually hear my voice coming out of a live human body for once.
Yeah. Or from the experience of this show, that voice coming out of a live human body. I'm just having a little fun with you. The thing I wanted to point out before we go, because we're wrapping up, is Talking in Stations is famous. So CCP put out the speakers for eVegas, and they said Matterall from the Talking in Stations fame. So we want to say thank you to Manifest for putting that in there. Really appreciate it. And this is the show. You've just watched it or listened to it. We'll have you back next week when we bring up another topic. And for those of you going to eVegas, I will be speaking on EVE history and among other things. So check it out and definitely go to EVE Vegas if you get a chance. It's a huge 3-day party for anybody who's a fan of EVE. There's always something to talk about with just about anybody. You guys want to plug anything before we go?
I've already been sufficiently plugged. Thank you.
want to give a shout out to the PL Online tournament team, who I know are going to be absolutely fantastic. And we're talking about Eve meets. I think Eve Northeast is coming up soon. I don't know exactly when it is, but you guys can like Google it and stuff. A lot of cool people are going to be there. And if you get a shirt, I think there's actually going to be a PL logo on it too, because YOLO.
Yeah, that's right.
Shout out to the Bastion Alliance tournament team who are learning massive quantities of lessons right now in deep humility. Good luck, guys.
Thanks. Seamus?
The only example I can think of off the top of my head would be Eve University's personnel officers who work tirelessly to admit all the many new players who are constantly putting applications in.
Oh, that's right. Eve University, great place, and you're a legendary name coming out of Eve University. So thanks for coming out and doing the show too. All right, that wraps it up for today. Oh, Seamus, do you have one more thing?
Nope, that's it.
Great. Want to thank everybody that showed up. We did lose Celine, as Carnero said earlier, and Apotheny because they had to go, and the rest of us do too. But always hang out in Talking in Stations Discord, where you can jump into public. It's free, and talk to us when we're hanging around. I want to thank Asher and Carneros and Elise and Seamus and the other two guys for showing up. That's all we have this week. We'll see you next week on Talking in Stations.